Hello, welcome to When the Smoke Clears. I am the recovery plug. What's happening, everybody? Well, it's another great day, man. So, how's it going? Well, you know how I like to always get my video podcast started, always with a moment of silence, followed by the serenity prayer for the addict who still suffers, and for those of us who are still bound down to some sort of struggle that keeps us from moving forward in our toxic life that we live in, man. So, yeah, if you would please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference. All right, well, let's get started. Well, yeah, man. So how's it going, fella? Everybody, man, check this out. What I wanted to do today, I just gonna, I had a few things kind of that I wanted to talk about, and first, I just want to kind of just read the just for today. Quote that they have, and then I'm going to get into a little bit of that quote, and then what has helped me to deal with what the quote is talking about. So there we go. That's what we're going to do today. So at any rate, let me get into it, man. Let me get going here. Let me switch these things out right quick with these. And I'm going to read that thing. I wrote it down here, and it says, just for today I will be honest, embrace life with all its pressures and demands. I will practice honesty, even when it's awkward to do so. Honesty will help in not hurt. My effort is to live clean and recover. Okay, well, that is the just for today reading, right? And what I wanted to kind of elaborate on that is that, in the world of, a lot of things that what I mainly focus on here on my channel is addiction, recovery, and spirituality. That's the kind of realm of that's the kind of mixture that goes on here in my channel. And so along those lines, with that, being honest in that just for today is it's one of those things that in the world of addiction and in the world of darkness and in a world that is it could be the world of darkness is a combobulated thing of many different things. It could be addiction. It could be any sort of addiction. It doesn't just necessarily have to be drugs or alcohol. It could be anything. And along that, it comes with stress, anxiety, depression, dealing with PTSDs, dealing with trauma, dealing with childhood trauma, and that sort of thing. So it's a big thing. You know what I mean? It's not. It's kind of hard to just kind of squeeze something into this little box, if you will. But my main focus, I guess, is talking about my experiences, right? So because I don't elaborate or talk about any other thing than what I've either studied, what I've either experienced, or whatever. If it's something that comes out of one of the books that I read, you know what I mean, or perhaps maybe out of some of the people that I follow, who are well educated in their practices and in the things that they talk about. You know what I mean? So, for example, one of the guys I like to follow is Dr. Stephen Ho, and he's the immortal guy. And then I like following him. And then Dr. Gabor is another good one that I follow a lot because he's been for many years dealt with people in addiction over in the Vancouver area. So I know, and then he's also an addict too. So it's good to get somebody who's professional and has studied and is a doctor in all this stuff, and he's also an addict. You know what I mean? So he's giving insight from both sides of the coin, which is very, very intriguing to me and very helpful, right? And also Mr. Greg Braden. Mr. Greg Braden's a geologist, and he's got a couple other titles to that he's got a couple other PhDs or whatever that he's at, but he's a geologist and he's a scientist. Does a lot of stuff with the gosh, what is that thing called? Well, I forgot, but anyway, he's another good one that I like, that I follow and get a lot of information from. And there's a few other spiritual, gurus and stuff like that I like to follow also, and I study behind them. You know what I mean? I'll study a lot of the things that they've written and that sort of thing. So there's going back to the reading of just for today with the being honest and that sort of thing. That's one of the things that I found in my in the world of addiction when I was in that world, that being honest was a big thing, man. You know what I mean? And not more so like I wasn't like, not that I was lying like to family or whatever like that. No, it wasn't really like that. It was more so lying to myself. You know what I mean? Lying to myself in a sense that, I was hiding behind the use of drugs and that sort of thing to not deal with the feelings that I was going through, right? Not dealing with the depression, not dealing with the PTSDs, not dealing with the drug addiction, not dealing with the childhood traumatic experiences, not dealing with any of that stuff. And, I was always, since as long as I could remember, always had this, front up, you know what I mean? Like, I exercised a lot, and I always kind of would watch what I ate and presented myself as if I was this healthy dude, you know what I mean? And as like I had it going on because I had a business and I was healthy and this and that. But all the meanwhile, man, was I getting tore up in my head, man, you know what I mean? And in my soul, you know what I'm saying? And even trying to do a lot of the things that I was doing involved, like with my church groups and that sort of thing, there was always something, man. Something just wasn't right, you know what I mean? And I just could never figure it out. So I was being really dishonest with myself, saying that, hey, you know what? You're good, dude. You know what I mean? But all the meanwhile, I wasn't, you know what I mean? And it took, believe it or not, it took a relapse for me to finally figure out what was missing. You know what I mean? And man, by no means do I want anybody to go what I went through. You know what I mean? So it's that's the whole purpose, right, of doing these videos, so that someone else can hear who's maybe in the early stages, who may think that they're have a little problem, or maybe they feel a little depressed, or don't feel like they just don't want to live no more, because I've been there, you know what I mean? And there was always something missing, man, you know what I mean? And not until I relapsed the last time, after being sober for 10 years, you know what I mean? I had a stint of sobriety for 10 years, and then I relapsed, and that relapse lasted me 5 years, man. And man, was I being dishonest with myself in those 5 years, like really bad. And it was, I had to get to a point where you have to do this, like, you have to really take an inventory, I guess, you know what I mean? Take an inventory of yourself and really come to the realization that, hey, you know what? If you want to do something about what's happening here, then you're gonna have to take action, right? And as hard as as easy as that sounds, you know what I mean? Man, it's one of the hardest things a human being has to do when you're in that world. You know what I mean? And it's not easy, man. You know what I'm saying? And I can understand how people be like, man, why don't they just get out of the street, or why can't they just stop using and da da da? But it's not that easy. You know what I'm saying? it's not that easy, because ultimately what's happening here is you have a disease, right? You have a disease with no known cure. That's the thing, you know what I mean? It's not like you can take a pill, give me a shot and I'm good. No. This is something that there are avenues that you can take to live a life without using, right? Live a life with settling the depression, settling the energies that the PTSD gives you, the trauma, the drug addiction, whatever it is that's bothering you. There's a way to keep that dormant in your life and move forward and have a good and happy and productive life, right? And like I said, I've been involved in the addiction world and in recovery world for, oh gosh, like all my life, actually. You know what I mean? That all my life I've been involved in that. And like I said, I've mentioned it in a few other videos, man. The first time that I took a drug or indulged in some alcohol, I was in the first grade when that happened. You know what I'm saying? And there's even stories that one of my grandfathers told me about me sipping some beer when I was a baby. So it could even be younger than that. You know what I mean? I might have even been 4 or 5 years old when I first drank some alcohol. You know what I mean? And so the journey's been long. You know what I'm saying? I've been involved in drugs and alcohol for my whole life, just about. So there's different avenues to keep those things dormant. And when I say keep them dormant, I don't mean to put them in the back of your backpack and just leave it there and just carry this baggage with you. That's not what I'm talking about. And what I'm talking about is it took me a long time to figure this out. And one of the things that I did when I figured out that, okay, dude, you know what, you're being dishonest with yourself, number one, and we gotta figure out a different way. We gotta see what's happening here, and we gotta come up with a different plan of action, right? And I was grateful enough, man. I was lucky enough to, and I'm grateful for this, that I was lucky enough to have had some people come into my life that that reminded me of the process, right? Of the process, of the programs, of the help. You know what I mean? Because you have to be honest with yourself, number one, and then you have to start feeling and attaining that compassion. You know what I mean? And compassion is merely, trying to alleviate suffering. You know what I mean? Either trying to alleviate your suffering or you trying to alleviate someone else's suffering. And that's compassion, man. And until you can show compassion on both sides of that coin and be vulnerable and allow yourself to be teachable and allow yourself to get your mental thought process to change, because you have to allow your mental thought process to be malleable. That's number one too, because we live for so long doing certain things, and this is kind of like a default, the way I think type thing, right? So I'm just right here, and I don't want to get past any of this. This is how I've been thinking for many, many years, and this is how it is. But in that process, I wound up being, addicted to drugs, and then dealing with PTSDs and dealing with depression, dealing with, suicidal thoughts, dealing with childhood trauma, all that kind of stuff, right? And it wasn't until like I said, I mentioned earlier that I met some people, right? And, after my last treatment center, I met some folks, man, and they introduced me to meditation, and I've been meditating. You know, I didn't know I was meditating, but I can remember always. You know, a lot of times I would sit in silence and just think, and it was meditating. I had no idea, right? But once these people that I met, they introduced me to this stuff, and I started practicing. And the more I practiced, the more things started clearing up in my mind. The more things started clearing up in myself, in my heart and soul, spiritually, man. And it it wound up allowing me to tap into this energy. I don't know how to explain that, except for there's an energy that's out here somewhere. You know what I mean? I don't know where it's at. It's out in the universe. It's connected to the universe. It's connected to Mother Earth. It's somewhere. But I know that it's alive and it's there. And I found it while meditating. And I'm telling you, you know, personally, my meditation process when it started was trying to, and this is I learned this from one of the guys that I from gosh, I forgot the guy's name. It just flew by my. But anyway, I learned this from them, and what it is was just sitting in silence, but trying to. I remember the guy's name from Toshe Rinpoche, yes, a Tibetan monk, and he was saying that you have to in your meditative process. It's not you just want to try to think of a thought and stay on it before another thought comes. You know what I mean? And that's just the process, right? And that's how I started. And I couldn't do it, you know what I mean? I would think one thing and then next thing another thought, another. It was hard to just stay on one thought, to stay focused on one thing. But when you are staying focused on one thing, you start working on something and your brain starts clicking. And that's, you're basically working out your brain, you know what I mean? And for me, I was really intrigued with this because I knew that from what they were telling me, and then from what I started reading and what I started studying, and then following all these other people that I like to follow, it really intrigued me, the thing about the brain, because you know I at one point in my life had to have brain surgery done, so I'm really cautious about what's happening with that, you know what I mean? And so it really intrigued me, and I just said, you know, so there's a lot of stuff that goes along with the meditation that I personally do, because it's not only doing the thought process thing, and well, that was kind of hard, you know what I mean, going from one thought to the next, trying to lapse that time. You know what I mean? That's how you work on it. Is that you try to stay on one thought before the other thought comes. And in this space, from one thought to the next, is the space. That's right there is where you're finding that portal. That's where you're finding answers. That's where you're finding clarity. And for me, that's how it was. And when I first started, like I said, I couldn't do it, man. It was just like seconds. You know, 1 second, 2 seconds before another thought would come. And now I'm up to about probably 13 to 15 minutes, about 13 to 15 minutes that I can span one thought to the next. And it was in that process, one night I got really, I mean, I was just really sucked into that meditation mode, man. And I think I was already going on 2 hours of meditation, and next thing you know, man, there's this purple hue, and it's just floating. It's like a ball, and it's doing this. It's just floating, and then it kind of, it's purple, and then it kind of has like this hint of green, and then it just moving, and then it would kind of come close, and it just be like right here, and I could see it, and it was like something looking at me, and it kind of formed like if it was something looking at me. So that when I started doing that, it started happening to me regularly, and the more I studied on it and stuff like that, and practiced, then I figured out that that was my third eye chakra coming into play, which was, I had no idea about the chakras. You know what I mean? I was I now I'm a lot more educated on the chakras, and I had, that was what I was doing. I had activated that. I had activated that chakra, and you can't activate that chakra until you activate the other chakras, which is kind of a weird thing that I didn't know at the time that I had activated it. But doing this meditation process and doing my chanting and doing everything that I'm doing in my recovery, but doing it on a repetitive basis, this is not something that's happening just one time. You know what I mean? That's, to me, how I was able to get up to that point. And I've been there's been a couple of times in my meditation process that I've gone out of body experience. You know what I mean? And that is supposed to be the enlightenment, when you're floating in space, or floating out there. And I could literally feel my body just heavy, grounded, rooted down, and I'm not in it. You know what I mean? It's just this weird experience, but it's liberating. It's liberating. And when that happened, man, every problem, every adversity, every trauma that happened to me throughout my whole life came in this reel of like a Rolodex card. Da, 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 and they just going in front of me. Just, I could see all this stuff happening. And I knew it's there. I knew that I carry all that. You know what I mean? And when I allowed myself to let the energy carry that for me, after that day, man, oh, I felt like this just weight off my shoulder. I felt so light, man, and just so, I could just take a deep breath and be like, wow. And I just felt liberated. To be honest with you, that's the only word that comes to my mind, is I felt liberated. I felt like, because this energy talked to me. You know what I mean? This energy talked to me and said, hey, you know what? Follow me. Not actually just, not talk to me like that, like I'm talking to you, not like that. No, it was like this communicative telepathy type communication. I knew what it was. I knew what it was telling me. I don't know how I knew, but I knew it. And that energy is like a magnet. You know what I mean? And that thing, and you're like this little piece of steel, and when that energy moves, man, you move, and wherever it takes you, that's where it takes you. And that's how I've been living my life ever since then, man. And that's why, you know, every time I get it on here and do a video or whatever, I meditate on it, and whatever the energy tells me to talk about, then that's what I try to elaborate and talk about on. You know what I mean? And it's been a journey, man. But going back to that first thing that we talked about being honest, I had to really be honest with myself and be vulnerable. You know what I mean? I had to be vulnerable and honest, and let myself go into that energy, because I know that beforehand, the way I was living my life throughout my whole life, most of that life I lived, I lived with myself behind the wheel, and you know, a lot of times I crashed. You know what I mean? And a lot of I always I kind of like to kind of make a joke about it, but I tell sometimes people that, man, you know what, I got a bachelor's degree in project management, but I couldn't manage my life worth of shit. You know what I mean? And it's like, wow. But I always knew that I was missing something. I always knew I was missing something. But you know what? Since I can remember being a little kid, man, I always knew I had this ability to feel things, this ability to know when there was good and bad entities around. Um, I always had an ability uh, to talk, I guess, to the spirit world, in a sense. And it's I used to be afraid of it. I used to think it was this dark cloud following me all the time. And I want to remember one time I told my little sister about it, and they had this whole prayer thing for me and stuff, which was cool. You know what I mean? I was always looking to do whatever. You know what I mean? But I just didn't like having this energy, follow me. But I didn't know until years later when I started learning more about energies and that sort of thing. And all along, I figured out that it was my energy, it was my frequencies trying to pull me in. Say, hey man, we gotta do this, we gotta do that. And that's what you got to do. Everybody here, everybody who's watching this video, we all have a frequency that we have in our genes, in our biological system, you know what I mean, in our neurochemistry of our whole body and brain and all that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Heart, brain, and because, believe it or not, the brain and the heart are similar. They have a lot of the similarities. So it's like it's like your mini brain is what they say now. You know what I mean? But I'm not a neuroscience. I'm not a doctor or any of that stuff. But I do study a lot of stuff about the brain because of my injury, and a lot of the guys that I study, they're renowned doctors, and they don't publish bad stuff or wrong stuff, at least in my opinion. So. Yeah, and you have to tune in, man. You have to tune yourself in with your frequency has to match the frequency of that energy, man. And that's the energy of the divinity. That's a divinity energy, man. That's a divine matrix energy. And where that divine matrix is, I have no idea. It could be floating around us, right in front of us. It could be in the universe. But all I know that it's attached from Earth to me to it. And to you. We're all intertwined, connected somehow, some way. You know what I mean? But like I said, that energy, I've always had this higher sense of energy, if you will. And, it's been something that I always thought was part of this bad thing that I had going on. That's why I always kind of blamed a lot of stuff to that, and quite a few other things of why I was either doing drugs or living in that dark world or whatever. But ever since I started my meditation practice, man, and my spiritual journey has really evolved and has led my life to a personal space that I never knew about. And in that personal space, man, is where I believe the energies of the divine are at. That's our connection. You know what I mean? That's our connection to the to the a lot of people, they call it different things, right? They call it the light, they'll call it the Holy Spirit, they'll call it God, they'll call it Yahweh, they'll call it Allah, they'll call it Krishna, and Hare Krishna. There's a lot of names, Visa, all kinds of stuff. But it is, it's personal to me. It is a personal energy that I know that it's only mine. That I'm the only one in the world who has that energy right there. And my energy is part of the vast, big, divine matrix, right? And everybody has a connection to that. You know what I'm saying? And how you focus and intertwine your body, you're part of that puzzle. You know what I'm saying? So when you're down here on earth and allowing yourself to get consumed by this toxic world that we live in, then you unshape your part of the puzzle. You know what I'm saying? So basically what we're doing here is being honest with ourselves and saying, hey, you know what? We're really living this life so that we can go back to that puzzle. And the only way to fit in that puzzle is to go back the way you came. And when you got here, you were this purest piece of puzzle. Nothing was wrong with you. You were pure, you know what I mean? And just a divine piece of that energy. And as soon as you get into this world, you're introduced to suffering right off the bat. And then your whole life is living your life through suffering. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, it gets a little deep, but we're not going to get that deep. But anyway, my whole point here is that being honest with yourself. And when you are honest with yourself, then you can start doing things to keep those things dormant. You know what I mean? And like myself, I let it go to the energy. I know that they're still there, and at any moment, at any given moment, they can just come back up. You know what I mean? That's just part of the suffering. And but since I have the capability of free will, I get to pick and choose how the roadmap of my life goes. And meditation is one of those things that keeps me in that road. It doesn't let me veer off. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, so I practice one of the because I do quite a few meditation practices, right? But one of the meditation practices that I've been recently doing is the Hare Krishna meditation. And that one is really great. I like it, man. That one's really gotten me into this spiritual thing, man. And it's a cool. To me, I like it because it's a mantra that connects you to the divine energy, right? That's basically what it is, and it's originated from India, and it's originated. You know, being originated from India, you know, that's where the yoga comes from and that sort of stuff. So it really is an activator, man, for those chakras. If you commit and do this on a repetitious basis, it really, really works, man. And there's been studies on it. You know what I mean? There's been studies on this meditation, Hare Krishna meditation, and it's known to relieve stress. It helps with PTSDs. It helps with trauma. It helps with addiction, and so there in turn, it's going to help with the honesty. You know what I mean? So. It's just something to you know, maybe you can look into it if you want to try it. You know what I mean? I would sit here and explain the whole thing to you maybe on another video, but that's about it for this video, man. I'm running out of time, so I gotta close it up. But yeah, I'm you know what? Thank you very much for tuning into this episode. I'm grateful. I really am. Thank you very much. And if you would, please, at this time, maybe give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, and you know what? Just know that when you do hit that subscribe button, man, it don't cost you a thing. It don't cost you a thing at all. But you will be helping out another veteran, another homeless person, another person dealing with PTSD, childhood traumatic experiences, drug addiction, alcoholism, depression, suicidal thoughts, anger issues, sadness, grief, all of those things, my friend, because I have dealt with all of that stuff at one point in time in my life. And guess what, man? I know a way out. And my way out could be your way out. So Anyway, if you would please, yeah, subscribe to the channel, man, and share it. Thank you very much for listening. I guess until the next time on When the Smoke Clears, I am the Recovery Plug.